Hey guys, this is Podfics, and today we're going to be reading Spider-Man Reborn by Reborn. This is Chapter 19. His family, bar Damian, was still unaware of Peter's newest plan. While Damian was aware of his meeting with Red Hood, he didn't know the promise that will have Peter going back to the criminal. With the week ahead to wait for his first lesson, Peter decided he could be productive in a different way. He'd successfully hacked into his own tablet before and has started working on some new ideas. He didn't have Karen or Friday around for help in this, but if he could recreate the code, if only he could remember. Mr. Stark had shown him the process of creating AI, more specifically in how Friday and Karen were made, and he's even watched Ned mess with the codes. It would be hard to do this alone, but he has a brother who just might be up for the task. Tim! Peter ran around the second floor calling for his target. Tim hadn't been in his room, but he was sure his brother had to be in the manor today. He hadn't heard otherwise. Plus, with everything happening this past month, Tim has been ordered to stay in the manor for at least a little while longer. Yeah? Tim's voice called from below. Peter focused on the heartbeat as he followed the voice. He was still trying to learn each of their heartbeats, but his family had grown too much that sometimes it sounded like an army of drums going off in the manor. Still, he knew it was only a matter of time. Peter was getting better with each day, and his control has advanced a lot with their help. He could barely even remember what it was like before. Going through this alone, it sounds back-breakingly heavy. He doesn't think he could do it alone again. Not anymore. I need help. Peter shoved his tablet towards his brother once he entered the boring room. Tim sat on the couch, a notebook and textbook spread out in front of him. Peter remembered hearing Tim's plan to finish college online so he could help out the company. Look it. Bouncing on his heels, Peter watched Tim's face as he scanned the notes. Peter was sure his code might be off, but it was a start. He couldn't build something so advanced from nothing, but if he started small, he could add to it later. His plan was to first make an intelligent language interface, AI that could be used for a conversation only. He had tried to add more coding into it, but the numbers felt out of place in something so simply made. Peter was sure he could add a tracking interface and maybe connect it to the cameras and grid work if he had the help. Bud? What is this? Tim eyed the tablet, sitting straight into the seat. It looks like AI, Peter grinned as he hopped into the seat beside him. Right, yeah, no, obviously, Tim chuckled, ruffling his own hair as he stared at the tablet. Why not? Should've just printed out some college work for you. Tim changed a few lines, rewriting some code as he went through Peter's work. Peter watched, leaning into his shoulder. Some of the changes felt vaguely familiar, as if he knew they were right, but couldn't see the mistakes when he wrote them. Others were more complex and something he hadn't even considered. This is great. Good job, Pete. We can work on this in the labs tomorrow, okay? Tim hummed, saving the notes before passing them back. What has Peter done now? Damian questioned, stopping by the door as he passed. Peter had heard him eavesdropping for the past few minutes, no doubt already knowing the answer to his own question. He's inventing an advanced AI for language and communication. It's amazing. The coding needs some work, but honestly, kid is brilliant. Tim gushed, rambling on about numbers and rules, talking mostly to himself about the implications and advancement in technology with this. As expected from the offspring of Batman, Damian huffed before leaving. Pouting, Peter slid off the couch. Damian was clearly still mad about being ditched that night. Maybe he should tell him about it. He'll try and follow Peter again next time if he doesn't. Mind made up, Peter took his tablet and left. Tim's voice was still clear in his ears as he went to search for his other brother. Once they had this created, Peter could try and advance it to be as helpful and versatile as Karen or Friday. Can you eat anyone? Peter eyed the giant Venus flytrap in front of him. The large mouth set in a grin as his mom talked with Dr. Isley in the kitchen. Sure fucking thing, kid. Fuck's a bad word, Peter snickered, glancing over his shoulder quickly. He could hear his mom discussing some new bill that Peter thought sounded alright. Apparently there were issues with it, hence why she had collected her friends for a meeting. Since Peter had a half day from school, he had been brought along in hopes that he wouldn't cause trouble. It wasn't like Peter could run away from home. His dad and brothers made sure that it was impossible. Even Damian couldn't deal without disengaging the cameras first. Maybe for babies, Frank laughed, his leaves rustling. Aw, be nice, Frankie, Miss Quinn cooed as Peter felt the floor disappear from below him. Yelping, Peter clung to her shoulders before it all processed. Hey, I'm not a baby. Put me down, please. Peter wiggled as he was carried away. He was 7. He's too old to be carried around. Harley Quinn only laughed as she dropped him in the seat beside his mom. Sure thing, Petey Pie. Let Auntie Harley get your snack. Peter pouted as the woman giggled around the table. They all saw him as a baby, even though he was a first grader. He's almost 10, just 3 short years of it. He'll be as big as Damian soon enough. Peter took the offered PB&J that Miss Quinn made, chewing on it while forcing a frown on his face. It only served to make them laugh again. Well, I think I should take Peter home, his mom smiled, nudging his side that drew a smile from Peter. He left his seat to climb onto her lap, secretly pleased to spend much more time with her. He couldn't remember having this much time with his parents from before. We'll meet up later tonight, girls. He couldn't lose this, and he won't. Once he and Tim finish their first AI, they can expand and integrate it into everyone's phones and comms. Peter has plans to ensure that they stay safe, and soon enough, Peter could join them out at night too, once his bedtime wasn't so early. Peter sat on his bed, feet kicking the air as Damian sat on the windowsill. He should have expected this, but he had foolishly hoped his brother's current anger for him would stay. He had avoided Peter while he was recovering and only spent time to test his reflexes and his strength. Peter was confident that Damian would just avoid him till Peter next got in trouble. You plan to see him again, Damian stated, no questions about it. Yeah, he isn't so bad, Peter sighed at their old argument, dropping the battering he had stolen from his dad to chew on. It was a miracle they haven't confiscated it yet. No one believed him, and Peter knows not to share his opinion at the table. If his parents or any of his older siblings think he's met the Red Hood, Peter would never be allowed outside again. He couldn't share his ideas about the guy with anyone except Damian, and his brother was firmly on their dad's side about it. Just because he hasn't hurt you does not mean you are safe, Damian scoffed. You are still a defenseless child, with little skill outside of your intelligence. Are you calling me smart? Peter grinned at the indirect compliment. Damian didn't bother to respond, only raising an eyebrow before turning to look out the window. He won't hurt me, Damie. They sat in silence for a moment as Peter watched his brother. He was leaving for Nate's after school the next day, and he couldn't have Damian following him all night. Peter couldn't think of any way to explain that to Hood. Must you search for trouble everywhere you go? Is it so hard to stay home and play civilian? Damian sighed, slumping back into the sill as he avoided Peter's eyes. I have to do this, Peter stood as he spoke, joining his brother by the window. I'll be safe. Nate and Peter nodded at each other as the sun set behind the clouds. Peter had finally managed to insist on a sleepover at Nate's, and he knew his dad had already run all the background checks on their family since his first playdate. Without a pickup time, both of them could stay out later. Peter, still stuck to the shadows once they separated, he couldn't risk being caught again. Damian was looking for him from a different angle of the house, which gave Peter a larger window to skirt around. Once far enough, he left the shadows for a moment to race further away. He still hadn't figured out how to introduce Robin to Red Hood, and with the news talking about the altercation between Hood and Batman, Peter was even more worried. His dad hadn't been too hurt, but he didn't know how Hood was doing. Crime Alley felt more familiar as Peter crossed the street. A few stragglers still rushed along the sidewalk. Small groups huddled by alleys, and a few older teenagers ambled down the road. Ducking closer to the wall, Peter tried to listen for Red Hood's heart. His tempo felt slower before, calm and strong. He could hear it again just a few blocks away. Peter followed the beating drum, eyes jumping to every movement he spotted. His neck prickled the further he walked, despite staying hidden. He wasn't in danger, but there was still danger hanging over the street itself. Hood? Peter entered an alley where the vigilante stood. Unconscious men laid out on the ground. He could still hear the hearts beat, shallow and steep. Christ, kid, don't you have people looking for you? Hood groaned, backing from the bodies to step closer to him. Peter smiled as fingers ran through his hair. Nope, I snuck out again. Duh. Peter followed the Red Hood to his motorcycle. The sleek red body with a headless black bat on the front stood proudly once the tarp had been removed. Peter allowed Hood to lift him onto the front as he took the too big helmet. Don't you need one? Peter pulled it over his head, lifting the visor as he peered at Hood. I already got a helmet, Hood chuckled, flicking the visor so it'd fall shut. All right, Short Stack, do some stretches first, and then we'll begin. Red Hood entered the empty gym as the lights flickered to life. Mats covered the ground as various gym equipment covered one half of the room. The mats left a large open space where Peter noted had some red stains. The string thing won't happen in here, got it? Anything you want to tell me about that before we begin? Warm-ups first. The string thing stung. Peter groaned, hoping that wouldn't stick. No, I can control it. Maybe. Hood might not be happy to hear that the Joker's concoction caused it, plus an unfortunate spider thrown into the mix. Peter ran to the mats ahead of the Hood as he fell into various stretches Dick and Tim taught him. Hood stood to the side, watching him go through the steps. Ready to begin, Peter stood up before turning to face the vigilante. What are we going to start with? Kicking. Hood shook his head before walking onto the mat. You're a little on the short side right now, so there isn't much we can do with the larger opponent. I want you to kick out my leg, just behind the knee. Not enough to force it to break, but enough to drop me. Got it? Nodding, Peter bounced in place. He was ready for these lessons. Excitement and adrenaline rushed through him as they took mirroring stances. Hood reached out, correcting his arms before settling back in place. I'll make a swing, and you come around to my side. Following the instructions, Peter ducked at the slow fist from Hood. Moving to the side, Peter swung out as he kept in mind his strength. His foot landed lightly against the knee as Peter bounced back a short distance. Your aim was a little low. Try half an inch higher and some strength behind it. I won't break, kid. Again, Peter ducked the fist before swinging his leg around. Connecting with the back of Hood's knee, he jumped back as Hood faltered. He didn't fall, but the stumble was an improvement. Peter grinned. Did you see? I almost dropped you. Laughing, Peter bounced to Hood's side. Red Hood nodded as he ruffled Peter's hair. You did. Good job, chum. Did he hurt you? Peter asked as he sat on the mat, a water bottle held between his hands. Red Hood leaned against the wall, his mask still on as Peter leaned onto him. Who? The modulator hummed. Red Hood was nothing like the news portrayed him as, and Peter knew his family had their own opinions. He just couldn't see it. Batman. The news said you two fought. Peter closed the bottle, letting it fall by his hip before turning to face the red mask. Red Hood sat straighter as Peter settled on his knees, fingers prodding over ribs and muscles. I'm fine, kid. Just a little brawl. It wasn't just a brawl. Peter didn't know the details, but he had heard snippets from Dick when he eavesdropped on a conversation, and it wasn't his fault that his family tended to forget he could hear them in the manor. His dad had changed the cave so he couldn't really hear inside it without serious focus on it, but any conversations above ground was fair game. So why do you hate him? We disagree on things. Why do you keep running away? Peter frowned at the answer. He slumped back against Hood as he stared at the bloodstains on the mat. I'm looking for someone. It's been years and years, and still, Peter had to be right. He's trusted his family to come home, and they have. All except one. Jason might be dead. Peter knew the logistics of someone missing for that long. He knew the chances, but still, he couldn't help but hope. Jason was his older brother, the second oldest when he first woke up in the world. He understood Peter best before he could even talk. He was there, hovering by Peter's crib, or on the floor with him. Peter had seen him as the older brother he had always wished for before. He loves Dick, of course, but with Jason, it was different. It was encouraging and calm. It was something Peter had always dreamed about once upon a time. He wasn't ready to lose that. He never wanted to lose it. He knew the chances, but he couldn't give up on him. Not if there was the slightest possibility that he was somewhere out there. My brother Jason, he's missing. I know he's alive, and I need to bring him home. Peter spoke, staring at the red. His vision blurred as he spoke, the red mixing with blue in an ironic and painful way that he couldn't. Oh, Hood whispered, arms pulling him into a hug from behind as Peter turned to cry into Red Hood's chest. I'm sorry, Pete. Peter fell asleep on his chest as Hood stared at his little brother. He's grown so much since he last saw him. His biggest regret might have been leaving for Ethiopia, but maybe he regrets leaving Peter most. He never thought of Peter searching for him after he died. Fuck. He died and came back, and the entire time Peter was hoping to find him again. Peter was running off alone looking for him. How long has this been going on? Bruce has to know what Peter's up to. He has to know Peter is still looking. He thought they all moved on. Bruce had taken in more kids than the zoo took animals, and somehow he never imagined anyone is still waiting for him to return. Talia said Peter had new big brothers. Peter had even sought out the Red Hood to ask him to lay off of him. He thought... Pulling Peter close, he stared at the empty gym around them. The pits were quiet here. When he first saw the kid, he didn't know what to think. The spunky child showed up and demanded to call the cops over a dead body. A body of a pedophile that might have survived if Peter did call for an ambulance. Then the kid never stopped sneaking out to enter crime alleys, searching for him. Bruce somehow made an angel with Selena, and he doesn't even know it. This kid, Peter murmured, curling further into Jason's chest as he sat on the ground. He couldn't move, not while the kid had tuckered himself out with training. Training to protect his family and find him. Should he tell him? Would Peter keep this secret, or would he go out and reveal it all to Bruce? He couldn't even kill when he knew Peter was coming into the side of town. He didn't want his brother to see him do things like that. Christ. The league taught him so much, but he was not prepared for his kid brother to show up with the same morals as Bruce, but with the understanding of a fucking saint. What does he do now? Hood reached up, unlocking his mask before placing the red hood by his left. He ruffled his hair as it was freed from the hood. Peter still slept soundly as Jason curled around him tighter. He couldn't hurt him. He couldn't go after Bruce as long as Peter loved him so much. He could almost see it, Peter storming into Crime Alley to lecture him on it, uncaring about the dangers of a little kid wandering the streets so late. Fuck. The pits were so quiet right now. He couldn't feel the sickening familiar rage for Bruce with Peter in his arms. His mind felt quiet and at ease here in the empty gym. Peter searched for him. He's still looking. Jason dropped his head back, staring at the ceiling above. He could feel his brothers breathing in his arms, safe and alive. Two opposing ideas warred in his mind, a decision he had to make soon. Peter would no doubt hold a grudge if he found out from someone else. Reaching for the helmet, Jason placed it back over his face before nudging Peter awake. "How was Jason?" Nate asked as both boys climbed into his window. Peter barely fought back a yawn as he dropped into Nate's bed. "Dylan was pretty happy I stayed later. We watched the first 3 Harry Potter movies." "He's okay," Peter groaned, kicking off his borrowed shoes before burrowing into the blankets. He still felt embarrassed for falling asleep on the Red Hood after training. He's never fallen asleep on someone during a lesson. God, Hood must think he's a baby. Nate pulled him off the bed to his sleeping mat placed beside it. Peter couldn't even manage a groan as he rolled onto the extra pillow. He barely had to blink before falling asleep. The nap from earlier had helped, but he was really tired. Hours later, or minutes, Peter awoke to his senses warning him of another presence. No danger, but someone was inside Nate's room. Peter recognized the heartbeat immediately as he tried to burrow into his sleeping bag to avoid them. "Peter!" Damian's voice snapped quietly, a sharp poke to the ribs drawing Peter awake. "Nate's gonna see you," Peter grumbled, swiping at Damian as he sat up. A quick glance at his friend showed Nate fast asleep, drool drenching the corner of his pillow. "I do not care. You went to see him again, correct?" Peter nodded, frowning as he tried to understand what was going on. Had he said anything in regards to his identity, who he is or where he goes? The Red Hood seemed lonely. That was all really Peter had taken note of during his time with him. He hoped to be the new vigilante's friend, and maybe it was working, but he had no idea what was beneath that mask. "No? Why?" Peter yawned as he spoke, rubbing his eyes tiredly. He could not understand why Damian had snuck into Nate's room for this. He would still be out on patrol, unless something happened. Was someone hurt? Did Batman catch Hood? Are they okay? "Nothing," Damian huffed as he moved towards the window. "Good night." Peter fell back into his sleeping bag, eyes slowly shutting again. His brothers were all weird in their own way. Damian had to have picked up strange habits from being an assassin, but waking him up for nothing reached the top of the list now. He'll see his family in the morning and make sure they were fine. Then he'll have to check on Red Hood too. He hoped it really was nothing. Alright guys, and that is the end of chapter 19 of Spider-Man Reborn by Reborn. I hope you guys liked it, and I'll see you next chapter.